Thank you, Roman. Yeah, today I would like to share some insights of our past project. We had to deal with a lot of data in this project, especially on the content fragment side. You already see it in the title. And when I first joined the project, I was presented a diagram that you see here on the slide, and you cannot read anything, but you see a lot of boxes and arrows and stuff like this. And I was thinking like, oh, that's maybe an SQL database schema. Maybe they connect AM to a MySQL database or Oracle or something like this. But then a colleague told me, no, that's not a database schema. It's our content fragment model. And I was like, what the hell? Come on. It was super complicated. Yeah, and this was my start in the project. And I would like now to share some insights and help you, if you have the same challenge, how you can get around some of these challenges. So first, some key figures about the project. It was automotive industry. Of course, they're quite complex. It was on AM6.5, managed by AMS, but most of the stuff you can also apply to AM Cloud projects. The goal of the project was to replace a custom-built CMS by AEM, and the CMS should act as a primary source for vehicle and dealer data, which is a bit uncommon, but which was part of the requirements. And these content fragments that we had in the system define a lot of different stuff. First of all, vehicle data, like how fast is your car, how much wheels do you have on your car, what's the power, and so on. Business data, like what kind of packages are in the system, like a premium package, standard package, and whatever, what accessory are belonging to these packages, for example. We had finance data in the content fragments, like what's the lease rate, what's the price of the car, things like this. Of course, we had the dealers in the project, like to show them on a map and so on. And we had a lot of different other kinds of things like promotions, disclaimers, a lot of configuration in content fragments that ended up in this high amount of content fragments. In total, at the end, the content fragments were exposed for different use cases. First of all, of course, for the website. So we wanted to show the cars, we wanted to show the packages, car configurator, what kind of accessories are available, what is the pricing for all that stuff. But then we also had third-party clients, and the idea was to connect them via GraphQL to the system so that they can consume some data there. There were about 1,000 clients in this area. In total, we had 125 content fragments, so quite a lot, and 1 million content fragments in total. So that was really huge. And as you can imagine, this also led to quite a lot of challenges throughout the project. So first, a bit on the structure. So I will not explain the whole 125 content fragments, of course, but I will show you the main structure that we had in the project. So that was a brand content fragment model, because we had multiple brands, of course, in the system. The brand was referencing then its series. So like you had a BMW, then the series was maybe a BMW 3. Then you had a model, like a coupe or whatever. Then you had packages, like a premium package, a standard package, or whatever package. Then you had color groups, accessories, and even accessory parts, and everything was referenced. So from the brand, you could drill down even to the accessory part, so you know exactly what is part of which package, and you can show everything on the website. So this was the main structure. So of course, there was also all these other things, like finance data and so on, but that was the main things. And I will show now some examples based on these main content fragment models. So what were the challenges in this project? There were quite some challenges, of course. First was authoring experience. Authoring experience was the smallest challenge, I would say. It was going quite well. The only thing that you need to check is you need to create a logical folder structure, of course, because if you have so many content fragments, you cannot just put them in one folder and then that's it. So what we did is we had like a brand main folder, then we had below the brand folder, we had the content fragment for each brand, we had subfolders then for each brand, so like here NSU, maybe someone knows it, still some old brands, NSU and Adler are the brands. Then a row 80 is a series, for example, or Prince is a series, so we had them as a subfolder, and this way you drill down from subfolder to subfolder into the different kinds of content fragments. And this way it worked quite well, so we
didn't have any issues with authoring experience. So even with so many fragments, if you can drill down, it's still working out. So there's no performance problem in the GUI, and whatever was working quite fine. So what you of course need to avoid is to have a massive amount of content fragments in one single folder, because then the GUI will just break. But if you can drill it down like this, it's no issue. But we had a lot of issues in other things, and the biggest issue was on the GraphQL side. And there's a GraphQL limitation, and that's a sentence now from the Adobe documentation. The ability to perform direct queries may be deprecated at some point in the future. So what does it mean? Direct queries means directly accessing the GraphQL endpoint. And the result was like this. Yeah, that's our front-end people. No GraphQL for the front-end guys, only internal. So that's a big issue. From the front-end side, you should not access GraphQL directly, but you should access it via a GET request, so the so-called persisted queries. So you have an endpoint, simple GET, you get JSON back, and that's it. But the query itself is defined, predefined by the backend people. So that's a big limitation for the front end, of course. But the reason why this is done like this is quite simple. These GraphQL queries are post requests, so they cannot be cached. And even worse, the query is part of the body, so it's not a parameter, but it's really the body of the post request, so you cannot cache it on the dispatcher. That's not possible. You could cache it on the CDN level. This might be possible, but if you work with Adobe engineers, it's not always easy to get them to do some CDN changes or get it the right way, let's say, like this. So that was the first limitation that we had. So we were stuck on persisted queries. But we had some more, like typical use case, can we use a multi-field in our content fragments? So probably everybody knows it from the dialogues. You have these multi-fields. Some years ago it was unofficial, so there were some third-party libraries that were supporting this, but it was not official. Now it's official in the dialogues, but in the content fragment models, it's not officially supported. So there's no multi-field in the content fragment models. You can still do it. There are still ways around it. The problem is just, since it's not officially supported, when you access it via GraphQL, you get a JSON fragment at the end. So probably you get the data that is inside the attributes, because the GraphQL endpoint doesn't recognize it. So you get a JSON, and inside the JSON you get another JSON for the whole multi-field. And so it's not really usable for an use case where you want to expose some stuff, because it's just hacky. So what you can do there is, first of all, avoid multi-field. So that's the one option. Or you can use referenced content fragments. So basically, you have a second content fragment model that is just one of these lines, and then you have multiple references to these content fragments, and this is where it's working like this then. So that's a solution, but reference content fragments have other issues. I will show you in a few minutes. Yeah, so that's one of the things that we tackled. Another limitation that we had a really simple requirement. How can we get all models of the current year when we know the series name, and we also want to get some brand data? So we had some data out of the brand object, some series information, some model information. And we wanted to filter on series and model level. Sounds quite simple. So we start with the brand, then we filter the series, and then we filter the model. The problem here is it's not that easy. So there are two issues. First issue, filtering is only possible on the first level. So the filter only applies to the brand level. I will show you in a second with a live demo what this means. And the second issue is you can only filter for one field of a sub-entity. So you cannot have two filters on the series level when you start with a brand, but only one filter on the series level. And that's also hitting us quite hard here. So I prepared a query for you. So that's the GraphQL interface of AEM, probably you know it. And I have defined a simple search here, so simple query. We're starting with the brands. So it's a brand list. and we want to get the brand name, and we want to get the series. And in the first step, the filter is only for our series name. That's a row 80. And what we would expect now is we get the brand, and we get only this series back, because we want the brand and our single series, the row 80. So what happens when I run this query? You see, we get the NSU, that's fine. We get the row 80, also fine, but there's also prints. What does the prints make there? And the problem is now, this filter that you see here is only applying on the brand level, but if I have here a series reference, it will just put in everything. So you cannot filter on the series level because there's no field to put a filter there. It's simply not possible. And that's a big issue because this means you always get all the data and you need to filter it on client side or somewhere else, but you cannot put a filter here that you just get a single series back. So that's a big issue. And a second issue, I wanted to filter not only for the series, but also for the model year. And in this case, I need a second filter. It's now commented out because I cannot even save the query without the comments, because it is syntactically incorrect. So I would need a second filter with a series. We have the models, then the year, and the year is 2025. But this is not possible because we get an issue because we have now two keys that have the same name in our object, in our filter object. So it's not syntactically correct. And there's no kind of array or something like this where you can put multiple of these filters. It's just not possible. So that was a big surprise for us that it's super limited regarding what you can do in GraphQL. And we had to find a solution for this. And the solution was basically, we start with the models. So instead of starting with the brand and then going to series and model, we start with the model, then we filter by the year, then we have the series where we can also filter, and the brand. But the problem is now is how do we get from the model to the series? Because we have only a link from the series to the model, but not the other way around. So what we did is we created back references. So basically at the end we had references in both ways, which is not very nice because you need to have them consistent, of course, but at least this way it's working. And I show you how it looks like then. So now we start with the model. So we have here the model list. And then the filter looks a bit different, of course. Then we have the filter for the series. Series is now a sub-entry of the model. And we have the year that it's directly inside the model, so we can have both filters. And if we run this, we get also another surprise, of course. Now it's having the right data, so we get here Cabrio from 2025. It's a row 80 and an NSU, that's fine. We also get a copy, same year, row 88 NSU. We don't get a print, that's fine. But what you can see is we get here the row 80, we get here the row 80, we get the NSU, and we get the NSU. So we get duplicate data at the end. Because for each result of a model, it's duplicating the series and the brand data. So it's somehow working, but it's still not perfect because we have duplicate data. So that's a drawback of this solution. You can somehow work with it, but you duplicate then the data. So if you have a lot of results, then you have a lot of duplicated data. Yeah, but at the end, we had to accept this and go on with this solution. But I have some more examples for you. Simple question of the consumer. We want to return all the dealers nearby. Super simple requirement. So we have a dealer in the database, in the content fragments. They have a latitude and longitude. We know the users or the end users, website users, latitude and longitude. How can we do a search now? Problem is, there is no distance search in AEM. It's simply not possible. Also, GraphQL doesn't support distance search. It's not there. And also, what's an issue? You cannot enrich the GraphQL in some way. So there's no API that you can hook in and say, when the GraphQL query is done, then you have some kind of post-processing, whatever. There is no API for this. So at the end, it's still, again, not possible. So what we did here in this case, Our solution was to use a servlet wrapper. So basically, instead of calling the persisted query directly, we use a servlet wrapper. So we created our own custom code that internally then is called in a GraphQL endpoint, returning the stuff back, do the filtering, do the calculation of the distance, and all these things. Add the distance to the results, sort them in the right way, and push it back to the client. So this way, it's possible to do this kind of distance search, but of course, it's not optimal. But at least it was a solution for our case. The next limitation, also quite simple requirement. We have promotions in the system. They have a start date and an end date. They have a model and an amount, so maybe you save 1,000 euros, but only this week. And one consumer now, of course, wants to get all the promotions that are currently active. They want to show it somewhere. And they want to take a look at the start and end date, so everything that is between start and end date at the moment should be returned by the GraphQL endpoint. Problem again, it's not possible. And the reason is, in GraphQL, there's no now. So you cannot say, the start date must be before now. The end date must be after now. It's not there. So there's no syntax for it. So what can you do in this case? And there are multiple solutions for this. Of course, you can filter at client side. Might not be a good idea, because if you have a future promotion, people might just wait till this promotion starts. Or you can do again a servlet wrapper. So basically, this is what we did at the end. We had a servlet wrapper, and then checking the start and end date, and just returning back what is really needed, and what are the active promotions. But again, so it's quite a heavy limitation of GraphQL that you don't have some kind of a date comparison there. Another thing, performance. This was a really crazy thing. We got a lot of out-of-memory issues when we were publishing a content fragment. So a content fragment is just a few kilobytes. If you publish it, you won't expect an out-of-memory issue. And first we were thinking, maybe that's something else. It's probably not our content fragment. Maybe it's a job or a listener or whatever. We're digging a lot in different directions. But it was a content fragment. And the reason was, there's a nice feature in AEM, and probably know it from the pages. When you publish a page, you get a long list. Do you also want to publish these 100 images? And that was the reason. So there was a reference provider also for content fragments. And when you publish a content fragment, it was also checking which other content fragments should it maybe publish. So when you start and publish now a model, then we had this back reference. So it was going from the model to a series. Then it was going to the brand. And from the brand, of course, it was going to all series, to all models, to all packages and whatever. At the end, it checked several 100,000 of content fragments, and the system just broke down. The good thing, it's now fixed by Adobe. It was fixed by Service Pack, but we were quite heavily affected by this issue. So after disabling the reference provider for content fragments, it was completely done. That's all fine. But we had this bug in Adobe AEM that this back reference was killing our system. So another topic about performance. So I said you can use these servlet wrappers, of course, to have an additional layer on GraphQL side and to do some kind of post-processing. The problem is now when you have multiple parameters, like in the dealer case, where the user has always a different kind of location. So no user will have the same location, so that the cache ratio will be quite low. So you get a lot of requests to your servlet. And when you run now a GraphQL query all the time, it will just put heavy load on your machine. So what can you do in this case? So in our case, we chose a simple caching solution. So we used a caffeine cache. So the GraphQL results were just put in a caffeine cache for some time, and then the post-processing was just on this cache. And this way it's much faster because you don't have a GraphQL query in the backend each and every time. So this saves a lot of CPU processing and data transfer between the servers, and helps a lot. So when you do this kind of post-processing in servlets, always check if you have issues that the GraphQL endpoint is called too often, then use a local cache like a simple caffeine cache. Yeah, another topic on performance. Reference content fragments slow down queries. So this is something that we experienced a lot. Reference content fragments means you have a content fragment that has a link to another content fragment, like the brand had a link to the series to the model, and so on. And when you have now a GraphQL query that is calling brand, series, model, and it also wants up to the package information maybe, then this slows down the machine. And I did a test here on my local Mac, so it's not an official performance test, of course. But our most complex query had 14 references, so it was really a big query. And it took about 3.5 seconds on my local Mac. And you can see here when you change the query that it has lower, the reference count is lower, then it goes down. So the reference count is really highly impacting the performance of a GraphQL query. The more of these references you have, it will just explode. And that's a big issue. So try to avoid that you have a lot of different references in the query. If it's in a model, it's fine. But if you query it, then it's an issue. On the other side, the number of requested properties has more or less no effect. So I tried this with different combinations. And there was no measurable effect if I request 1 property, 10, 100 properties. That's all fine. But the reference count is really heavily affecting the performance. Yeah, sometimes you can duplicate some data. This can help, like putting the brand name also in the series. Sometimes this can help you to save one level, but in general try to keep the query to a low amount of references, and also check your content fragment model that it's not too overcomplicated. Yeah, also we had some issues in general with slow GraphQL queries. First of all, make always sure that the index package is installed. So we were on AMS. Of course, the index package was not installed. It was managed by Adobe, but we had to make sure that the index package is installed by ourselves. So after installing the index package, was fine again. But make sure that there's an index package, especially for content fragments, this must be installed. Then another issue is that GraphQL loads the content fragments into memory for some filtering. Like if you have property checks, like a property must be of a certain value, then everything is loaded into memory that could fit this, and then it does the filtering inside the memory. So this can lead also to out-of-memory issues or heavy load on your machines. So when you have a lot of content fragments, keep this in mind, that the stuff is filtered inside the memory. Yeah, and the one thing that was our biggest issue at the end, so when you're on AMS, and the same is also applying for AM Cloud, is the storage is not on the server where the AM is running, so you have remote storage. Of course, the AM is running fast, the remote storage is running fast, but there's some network in between, and this adds latency. And so I had this query that the 14 references that took about 3 seconds on my local. What do you think? How much time does it take on the Adobe infrastructure? Is it 1 second? Probably not. 3 seconds, 5, 10? No, it's 30 seconds. It was 10 times slower than on my local machine. And that's a big issue because there's a developer that is developing some GraphQL query. Locally, it's running totally fast, fine. Then you deploy it, and it's 10 times slower. And that's a really big issue. There's a really simple solution for this, and it's the same as on the Mac machine. Just put in some local SSD, then it's fast again. The problem if you're on AMS, it's extremely expensive. So it's not like super expensive, but it's super extremely expensive. So they will charge you insane amount of money, so probably no project will be able to afford it. So when you're on-prem yourself, you host it yourself, and then you're fine. Just put in local SSDs, it's all fine. They are cheap. But if you're on AMS side, you need to find a different solution for this. Probably it's not possible to connect local SSDs there. Yeah, some key takeaways. First of all, keep your data in external microservices. So usually it's not a good idea to put 1 million content fragments in AEM. Especially you have these complex structures like on this automotive clients, where you have vehicle data that is, you have the series, the models, the prices, whatever, and everything is connected in some way, and a lot of different configurations. Try to keep it outside of AEM and not inside. Usually it's not a good idea to put it inside. Then limit the nesting to 5 to 6 levels, so that's also Adobe recommendation. So don't put in queries that have 10, 14, like I showed, or even more references, because it will just explode. It will not have an acceptable performance at the end. Use local SSDs, of course, if you can afford it, or if you run AEM on-prem yourself, then this is really fine. And of course, use persistent queries, so don't use the direct endpoint. On the one side, it will be deprecated at some point, maybe. On the other side, it's not recommended because then it puts a lot of load on the system, and you need to deal with the caching. So you need to find some way to cache it on the CDN level. But our experience with this was that it's really hard to get changes on the CDN level in the projects. Yeah, be aware of all these GraphQL limitations. So like I said, so there's no date comparison to now. There's no geo search. There's no, what was the other one? You have these issues with the references. So there's a lot of different limitations. You need to keep them in mind, because in most cases, it will not work out if you have a super complex setup. So that's why I said put everything also in the microservices, because there you have more influence. On the Adobe side, the GraphQL is fixed, so you don't have an API to hook in or do something else. It's just fixed. It's a black box, and that's why I need to make sure that your GraphQL queries also make sense there. Yeah, use back references where needed. So that was one solution that helped us a lot to not only be that was not only possible to go down, but also go up in the hierarchy, because then you can work around in some cases with the queries. If you need to filter in both ways, then you have again issues, of course, but at least it helps us in some cases. So maybe Adobe can fix this a bit and allow a bit more of these references that are more faster to deal with them. Yeah, and also servlet wrappers, use them when you want to enrich the data. So when you see that you need some kind of post-processing, just use a servlet wrapper. Of course, it has additional code, it's additional maintenance. It's not just pure GraphQL, but at least you can have your use case implemented. That's it from my side. I hope this will help you on the projects. Thank you very much, and now I'm open for questions.
Roland, I brought a lot of questions. The topic seems to be super interesting, so there are a lot of questions. And there's one question who has probably the highest vote I've seen today. It's 17 votes, so people are very curious. Would you recommend to use AEM for this use case? I've heard there's other CMS in this world.
No, for this use case, I would say, and I said it already, it's probably not the best fit, because the GraphQL endpoint is a black box, so you cannot influence it that much. Also, the content fragment is always exposed as a whole, so you cannot say you have 10 content fragment models in your configuration, and I just want to expose 5 of them via GraphQL. That's not possible. You cannot mark them to be not exported via GraphQL. So there are a lot of limitations, and especially on the filtering side, you're so restricted. So if you have something like, in this case, the automotive industry, try to put it somewhere else.
About changing, did you consider to drop GraphQL and go back to good old REST?
Yeah, that at the end it's an option, of course, and we did it in some way already because we had these wrappers around GraphQL, because you need some custom code at the end to manage this. The good thing about GraphQL is it's quite easy to change the queries without doing a code change. So having just a post-processing is more easy to maintain than just having it completely custom.
About the issue about the incorrect data AEM is delivering, have you ever checked with Adobe regarding this? Was it accepted as an issue?
Which incorrect data?
The problems you encountered with AEM GraphQL, AEM delivering incorrect data.
Yeah, it's not incorrect data, it's just a limitation of the language, so especially of GraphQL, so that you have you have the filter on the top level, but you don't have filters for the bottom elements or for the reference elements, and that's it's a limitation. I think maybe if you have your own custom GraphQL implementation, you could probably do this, but with AEM out of the box, it's not possible.
Yeah, we've heard GraphQL is the limitation. There was this question about using REST. But also could be the solution to really like custom code to support the requirements.
Of course, yeah. In some cases, it will not work out, as I said. So if you need to filter on the brand level and also on the accessory level, but you need to start on the CS, for example, then it will not work out. Or if you have multiple of these filters that are starting with the same object, it will also not work out. So there are cases where you get really to the end of GraphQL, and then you need to do custom coding.
Thank you, Roland. One not related question to your talk, but how is it to be here up on stage? How do you feel?
Oh, it's really nice. I think it's my 8th talk or something like this. It's really feeling nice to have a communication with the crowd and get feedback, and all the talks with the people. Yeah.
Thank you, Roland. It was great.
Thank you.